He kept attacking even while burning. The story of pilot Jeff. There had been no silence over Donbas for almost 2 years by then, and there was none on that day either, November 23rd, 2023. The sky was heavy and gray, as if exhausted from the war. And that very day, it would witness an act of heroism people would talk about for a long time. 26-year-old Ukrainian pilot with the call sign Jeff was preparing for his flight. Just another day, if such a thing could even exist in the second year of the war. The mission was short and clear: to strike a Russian S-400 surface-to-air missile system guarding Donetsk, which shot down everything that dared to approach within 30 miles, about 50 kilometers. He checked his instruments, cockpit, and ejection system. Every move was perfected by hundreds of flights. A minute later, the engines of his aging Soviet-built MiG-29 roared to life. The aircraft shuddered briefly, accelerated, and then the steel bird soared into the sky, leaving behind a cold, dimly lit airfield. For his comrades, he was simply Jeff. In the Ukrainian Air Force, everyone used call signs. Real names were known only to the command. It was a sensible precaution, since relatives of Ukrainian soldiers could live in occupied territories. That meant the Russians might try to use them to pressure or blackmail Ukrainian defenders. All this applied to Jeff, especially to Jeff, because pilots are considered high-value assets in any military. They're hunted specifically. He was only 26 at the time, quiet, focused, always keeping a cool head. He'd already completed over 150 combat missions. He'd launched more than 50 HARM missiles, high-speed American anti-radiation weapons designed to destroy enemy radar systems, dropped dozens of JDAM precision-guided bombs, and taken down 9 enemy Shahed-type drones. Behind these numbers were countless lives saved, Ukrainian soldiers and civilians who were spared from those very Shaheds. When people asked if he was ever afraid to take off, he answered simply, "It's scary when you get used to war. I try not to." For his commanders, he was an efficient pilot, a reliable piece of the vast machine fighting to one day stop this nightmare. For his brothers in arms, he was someone you could follow even into hell. But let's return to that overcast morning of November 23rd, 2023. Intelligence had reported activity from an S-400 system near Donetsk. This particular launcher had repeatedly sealed off the sky over the front lines in recent days, making any aviation or drone operation extremely dangerous. Its protection was dense. The task was clear but far from easy: destroy it to open the way for deeper strikes into enemy territory. The mission plan was as follows: approach at low altitude and use HARM against the radar, then drop a JDAM precision-guided bomb on the launcher itself. The risks were maximal: integrated air defenses, of which this S-400 was a part, and the possible intervention of enemy fighter cover. Takeoff was scheduled for 0400. Jeff listened to the briefing, confirmed coordinates, ingress angle, alternate route, and evacuation waypoints. He knew well that pilots are target number one for the enemy. In Russia, a downed aircraft brings medals and a substantial reward. More importantly, a lost aircraft is not just lost equipment, it means denied strikes against the enemy and dozens of casualties among Ukrainian servicemen and civilians that might otherwise have been avoided. Jeff studied the map carefully, memorized landmarks. Any small detail in flight could prove either decisive or fatal. Jeff took off in the pre-dawn light. The ground fell away. Ribbons of light remained below, and then it was only his instruments, the sky, and the target. He flew the assigned course, holding the lowest possible altitude to minimize the risk of detection by enemy radars. They reached the launch area. A ground message arrived, position confirmed. That meant the S-400 had not moved and the strike could proceed. The SPO-15, the radar warning receiver, was silent. No sound, no signal. That's why the first strike came as such a surprise. A flash to the right, a jolt, a tear across the fuselage. A wave of fire ran along the right wing. The indicators began to blink. The cockpit filled with the smell of burning and smoke. Jeff realized he'd been hit. But by what? From the ground or from the air? The SPO-15 was quiet, so there had been no radar illumination. Guidance was therefore infrared. Unfortunately, the old MiG-29s don't carry a factory-installed missile launch warning system for IR-guided missiles. Most likely, the aircraft had been picked up either by a Russian Tor air defense system or by an older but still painful OSA. The aircraft, however, remained flyable. Damage was serious but not critical. That meant the mission had to continue. Jeff drew a breath, leveled the aircraft, and despite the ringing in his ears, announced into the radio, working the target, His hand pressed the weapon activation switch, the first harm left with a sharp lurch, like an arrow from a top below. Seconds later, the screen flashed. Radar suppression confirmed. The target was engaged. Joy lasted only a moment. His aircraft shook again from another hit, again on the right, this time striking the tail. The jet rocked so violently that his head struck the armored canopy. Control authority dropped sharply. The pedals felt as if they were filled with cement. The stick still worked, but it had gone from light and responsive to sluggish and incredibly stiff. The hydraulics were damaged, though some pressure remained. Sweating so hard his knuckles went white, Jeff fought the controls and put the aircraft into the required altitude. He pressed the button and the second harm streaked toward the target. The airplane was nearly uncontrollable. The right engine was coughing and the aircraft barely responded to stick inputs. Jeff gripped the stick with both hands, braced his feet on the pedals, and pulled to set the jet on a return course. He understood that the longer he stayed airborne, the closer he could get to his own airfield and the greater his chances of survival. But when system failures cascaded and his MiG-29 became nothing more than a chunk of metal coasting on inertia, he knew it was time. His right hand went to the red ejection handle. A moment later came the sharp downward yank. The MiG-29 was equipped with a K-36 ejection seat, one of the most reliable ever produced in terms of survival rates. The pyrotechnic charges fired instantly. The canopy blew off to the side, then came a powerful jolt so strong it nearly blacked out his vision. The rocket motor under the seat ignited, yanking the pilot out of the doomed jet. Despite his helmet, he could still hear the engines roar. In his eyes, a blinding white flash against a black background. A split second later came a nearby explosion. Another missile had struck the now empty aircraft, turning it into a ball of fire. But Jeff's ejection sequence worked perfectly. The seat's automatic system deployed the air brakes and stabilizers. 1.5 seconds were enough to stop the violent spinning and stabilize the descent. The next set of charges fired, separating the pilot from the seat and deploying the parachute system stored in its backrest. A moment later, the drogue chute pulled out the main canopy. It was done. Time to land. Jeff would live. In the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, though, after the word live, one should put not an exclamation mark, but a question mark. Jeff had been shot down over territory held by Russian forces. That meant he could easily be executed on the ground or taken prisoner, and no one could say which was worse. Ukrainian soldiers returned from Russian captivity often looked like skeletons. Some had lost 90 to 110 pounds, about 40 to 50 kilograms, nearly half their original weight. The landing was rough. The impact threw him into thorny grass, and the parachute dragged him across the ground. With a well-trained motion, Jeff collapsed the canopy and looked around. About a kilometer away, his MiG-29 was still burning brightly. He glanced toward the spot where his jet had been moments ago and exhaled quietly, "Farewell, my friend." Dawn was breaking. In another hour, he would be completely exposed. He had to move fast. The enemy had likely already tracked his landing site and would soon be on the way. He switched on his emergency beacon. His coordinates were transmitted instantly. The radio replied with the coordinates of a rendezvous point. He was about 12 miles, roughly 20 kilometers from the front line. 20 kilometers of fields, woods, and open terrain. Luckily, patches of fog still lay over the ground. Jeff removed the top layer of his flight suit, activated the radio's low noise mode, quickly located the west, the opposite direction of the rising sun, and began moving in short dashes from cover to cover toward friendly lines. After about a mile, he heard the sound of engines. Russian troops were already sweeping the crash area. Voices, dogs, flashlights cutting through the fog. Jeff froze in a ditch, holding his breath. He could even hear their shouts. "Come here! It's all right! We're friendly!" Maybe 10 minutes passed, then silence again, only the faint rumble of distant artillery. He moved on, following power lines and tree belts as his guides. An hour later, he reached the designated point and concealed himself. Soon, he heard a rustle, then a whisper. "Jeff, where are you? I can't see you." In the dim pre-light dawn, the pilot saw a silhouette in Ukrainian uniform. He emerged from hiding and patted the man on the shoulder. "I'm here. Let's go." An hour later, Jeff was in an evacuation vehicle on his way back to the base. Ahead lay 3 months of rehabilitation. The aftermath of ejection, when the body endures up to 20 Gs of force, does not fade easily, and then the front again. For this mission, the Ukrainian pilot was awarded the Cross of Combat Merit. In August 2024, he received the Order for Courage, 3rd class. Whether by good fortune or misfortune, we don't know the real name of the man known as Jeff. By good fortune because it means he's alive. By misfortune because the war is not yet over. Which means Jeff will keep taking his jet into the sky, again and again, risking his life to complete his missions. Wars do not end on their own. They must be made to end. Thank you for watching. We'd appreciate your like and subscription to our channel. See you soon.